Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sarah Labrat, and today we are going to be talking about the 5 most common writing mistakes I see as a freelance book editor. If you go on to enjoy this video, or if you learned something from watching this video, please make sure you give it a big thumbs up because that really supports my channel by telling the YouTube algorithm that you liked my video and that somebody else might too. Also, if you go on to enjoy this video and want to see more like it, make sure that you hit subscribe because I'm constantly putting out more material like this. And now without further ado, let's get into talking about these 5 common writing mistakes. The first common writing mistake that seems to jump the most out at me when I'm working on editing somebody's novel or chapter is passive voice. And you may or may not have heard about this before, but passive voice versus active voice. Passive voice is where it reads like something is happening to the characters and they have absolutely no control over it and they almost kind of don't care is how it reads. Whereas active voice, things are actively happening to the characters or they are actively witnessing something. And therefore active voice is a lot more interesting to read because it actually holds you in the story. Whereas passive voice, it can kind of kick a reader out of the story just because it's kind of dull to read because it doesn't actually keep the reader interested. An example of this would be something like continued to spark is passive voice, whereas sparked is active voice. Passive voice also seems to be a lot wordier, and so switching over to more of an active voice can actually shrink down the number of words used in a book and make it read a lot better, which very nicely brings us into the second common writing mistake, which is flow and pacing. And what I mean by this is when you are reading a book and some portions seem to read really, really quickly and then some portions seem to drag on for forever. Yes, I do think this is something that a lot of us do and can be changed and fixed with editing to make it read a lot smoother, but some of the places that I find pacing issues the most is in the introductions and in fight scenes. A lot of book introductions seem to drag on for a long time and not really get to the meat of the story or even start hinting at a plot until several chapters in. And so that seems like it takes a lot of energy to get through because the pacing's not great because you don't know what the motivations of the characters are, you don't know what the plot is, and you're just expected to ride the wave until things actually start happening. So pacing on introductions are often very, very slow. So try to get to the action or dialogue or something that relates to the plot as soon as you possibly can, without also skimping too much on the introductory parts that are necessary for your story. The other areas that I think are most common to see pacing issues are fighting scenes and romance scenes. With romantic scenes, it seems like things are building and building and building and building, and then the romantic scene is just rushed through and it doesn't feel satisfying because of how quickly something that was building for a really long time is then over. I have read a couple books, both in my freelancing and published novels, that seem like it's building the entire novel or like half of a novel or something, and then the first kiss or something is like a sentence long, and then it seems like it just undercuts all the tension and then we move on. So give things the time that they deserve, but also not longer than that. With fighting scenes, this one was really, really interesting because I've noticed this in a couple of the manuscripts that I just finished editing where fight scenes were just too wordy. And because they're fight scenes and they're supposed to happen quickly, it can be very beneficial to shorten the sentences, make sure that there's still description in there, but just cut it down because when everything is happening in a whirlwind, it's happening very, very quickly. So if you're reading something like a talking scene and it's like the same pace as a fight scene, it doesn't actually line up with what's happening in the story itself. And shorter sentences make things read like they're happening faster. This can be one of the best possible ways to shrink your story down and speed it up, and therefore make the pacing better. The third common writing mistake I see a lot is the use of ly words. Ly words are often very, very weak words and are used as descriptors of other words when in reality you could just replace the other word with a stronger word and then you wouldn't need to use the ly word. And yes, this might partially be my vendetta against the word suddenly, but if you use the word suddenly in your prose, things don't read like they're happening suddenly because it undercuts the strength of the rest of the sentence. It's very easy to scan through a document and search for ly and then just go through, read the sentence, see if you can switch out one of the other words to make the sentence stronger so that you don't feel like you need a word that ends in ly. Like really, probably, suddenly, continually, completely, and so on and so forth. Rewording things so you're not using as many words that end in ly is something that I have had to work on a lot because that's something that took me a while to learn when I was first starting to write, was to avoid these adverbs because it actually weakens the sentences and therefore the overall prose, and it can speed it up like with pacing and make it a lot easier to read if you cut down on these words. It also means that it's less likely to be passive voice, which is just fun. It all works together. Alrighty, common writing mistake number 4. All of the characters sounding the same. And this can be either in dialogue or in their prose if you have a story that switches point of views, but Either way, if all of your characters talk the same, have all of the same inflections, have all of the same conjunctions or non-conjunctions like I am versus I'm, have all of the same speaking habits like ellipses or hyphens, or short sentences or long sentences, if all of them sound the same, or if you have a book that has multiple POVs and all of the characters' voices in those chapters sound the same, so that you actually have to have somebody's name used within a chapter to know whose chapter it is, they all sound the same. And I'm not saying you have to go to the complete other side of the spectrum either, where everybody is like crazy different, but you can use different word choice for different characters, either in dialogue or in their prose. You can choose one character to speak a lot faster with shorter sentences. You can choose one character to speak longer. There's just something so powerful when you are reading a book and you can tell which character is speaking without a dialogue tag or without it saying their name. It's so powerful and so cool to finally reach that level of writing where your readers can recognize which character you are talking about without mentioning who they are. Common writing mistake number 5. I'm pretty confident that most of us have heard the saying, show don't tell. And I would agree that it sounds easier than it is, but something that I've noticed a lot in the books that I've edited is that people love telling the reader what they should be thinking, what is happening, what they're feeling, instead of showing it through actions and behaviors. And the reason that I'm mentioning that today is that can lose your readers. It can distract them from what's going on in the story. It can make them put the book down altogether if they're annoyed by it. But going through and making sure that you are more often than not showing and not telling can be very, very beneficial to your story. So for example, instead of saying I was scared, you could go through and say my heart was racing, my hands were sweating, I was trembling, something along those lines where it's showing more of like what's actually happening rather than just the thought, oh, I'm scared. Those are my thoughts for today on the top 5 most common writing mistakes I see as a freelance book editor. If you would like to work with me, I will leave a link down below. I do chapter critiques and edits as well as full manuscript critiques and edits, so that will all be linked down in the description box below. Let me know if there was something that you learned from this video down in the comments below. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that thumbs up button because you have made it this far, and subscribe if you want to see more like this from me. With that, I'm Sarah Labrat. I'm currently posting 2 videos a week on Mondays and Thursdays most of the time, sometimes Tuesdays and Fridays, but I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.